What's up, everybody? I want to thank you for joining me for another video. For those of you that are here for the first time, in case you don't know me already, my name is Joe. I'm an entrepreneur, business life relationship coach, investor, and a father of two. Anyone that's been subscribed up to this point, I want to thank you. I really made this video because it's important to me, and I also want you guys to be able to get to know me a little bit, or at least to start. So I'm sure some of you are probably curious, where did I come from, what am I about, why I'm making this channel. Really to connect with people and kind of share the things that I've learned and I've been through. Maybe some of you have gone through similar things or going through similar things. I'd love to be able to utilize the comment section for that, which would be great, because I think it's important, and I think these topics really aren't discussed so much because they're so taboo in society and it's touchy. But I decided to do this video because something happened 2 days ago that I wanted to share, as well as share my two other experiences with two other family members. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but I grew up with addiction, alcohol and drugs, mostly alcohol. Few people with drugs was a huge problem in my family. Everybody that's close to me just about has some sort of addiction issue. My mother passed away in 2016 from alcohol, heart disease condition that I did not know about until it was too late. My cousin passed away last November. It's almost been a year now due to fentanyl. And I was always worried about that, but it's always so sudden. Any of you that have any relatives or have been through something like this can agree, you never really understand where their head's at or what they're thinking. Because it's like, it's so bad for you. What are you doing? You're ruining your life. Why can't you just stop? It wasn't until my mother passed away that I realized whatever power or issues these people have that's causing them to depend on these substances so much, even if they've got the resources to get better, it's a higher power. And I never understood it, and it was very frustrating, and I still don't understand it. I'm not perfect myself, but it's one of the reasons that I made a decision that I can change the future for myself and others, to really commit to building a different style of life, getting that out of the future generations to come. But I think we can all agree it's frustrating and you never really understand. And you never really understand because it's like, why can't you stop drinking? Don't you love us? Don't you care about us? Can't you stop using drugs? Don't you care about the people that love you so much? They do. I learned to understand that they do love you, but whatever power is pulling them to that is stronger. And I'm not a psychiatrist in any way or a psychologist, so I can't really break down the mental aspects, but I can say it usually roots down to issues they never dealt with from early parts of their life. It's a coping mechanism, right? Because they just want to forget. A lot of times it's subconscious. I think that they don't even realize it, but maybe it's something they didn't want to address because they didn't just want to go there. If any of you have had a similar circumstance or going through something similar, feel free to drop a comment and reach out directly. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say and what your stories are, because it's nice to know there's other people out there that go through something similar. But the story that happened for me 2 days ago, my father's been battling alcohol his entire life. And, you know, obviously he's my father, we've been close. Him and my mother were divorced since I can't even remember them being together. But he remarried about 5 years ago, and he had himself another son. He was 2 years old. So he started drinking again. He had gone to rehab during COVID for about 4 months. Really excited for him. He's finally getting his life together. Just in case he was starting to have some health problems, so I took that worry out, especially after what happened to my mother. I'm gonna get into that as well, story, food for thought. So he went away, thought he was gonna be gone for as long as it took. He went to California, but after 2 weeks, he's like, I'm coming home in a week. And I'm like, well, that's strange. You think that's gonna be enough time, but you know, this kind of man, he's gonna do whatever he wants. And you know as well as I do, when it comes to adults, they're gonna do what they want. You know, you can't stop them. That's the one biggest thing. Any of you that are dealing with a family member that's got a problem with alcohol, drugs are bad too, but with alcohol, when I was going through the situation with my mother, I said to the police, I was like, is there anything that we can do? Could we put her in a rehab? You guys have to be able to do something. And they said, don't take this the wrong way. Alcohol is legal. If you want to lock yourself in your home and kill yourself drinking, that's completely legal and you're allowed to do it. I'm like, oh my God. No, with drugs is different, but you always got to get someone to the step where they actually want to get help. You can't make them. They need to want help. They got to see something, you know, they want to get better. Any of you that have been someone that really took those strides to get there, I commend you, because that's a blessing. So in any case, I pick him up from the airport and we get back at night. He was hinting to me things on the way that something may be off with his wife, and he was worried. That's why he's coming home. And I'm like, I think you're overthinking it. You got a son there, this and that. He just came home from rehab. Like, this is a good thing, right? He's like, no, I'm telling you something's off. So we pull up to his house. I go to drop him off. And he's like, well, the lights are out. I'm like, Dad, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, yeah, probably sleeping. It's late. So we go inside, and first thing I noticed, no one greeted me. So I'm like, well, I think that your wife want to greet you and say congratulations. I know it's hard for you, be a little supportive. Nothing. I'm like, all right, helped him bring his luggage in, didn't think anything of it. But then I see him like kind of get disgruntled. I'm like, what's the matter? He's like, bottle of vodka that I left. And when I left, it's still here. I'm like, well, that's strange. Anyone that knows, get rid of that stuff. You don't want triggers as soon as someone comes home from recovery. That's horrible. And then there's a full bottle of wine there. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on now? I'm like, now it just seems like someone's being, an asshole about this, right? I started to get upset. I'm like, what's our problem? He's like, whatever, I'll deal with it. I'm like, gonna be okay for the night. If you need me, call me. I'm here for support. So I didn't have work the next day. I'm with the kids. And he texts me. And he goes, do you have a number to a locksmith that you use? I'm like, no, I don't use anyone in particular. Is everything okay? He didn't answer me right away. I'm like, oh, great. I'm like, hope everything's okay. He calls me. He's like, yeah, I didn't want to call you last night. He's like, I got home. I checked the house. He's like, my wife she left. She took all her personal belongings, any jewelry, anything of value, any money in the house that we had. And she took the baby. I'm like, what? I'm like, don't you think that immediately I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this is like the worst trigger that you can have. I mean, that's detrimental to someone's mental health. He's okay at this point, but the first thing I'm thinking is, oh my God, this is the last thing I need. We've gotten this far, and what better opportunity for this to happen than that? So then it started making me think about, my childhood and things that I've been through, and I'm like, shit, I really don't want to lose a third person that was in my inner circle, which brought me to this. Maybe you guys can relate to all this. So, my parents were divorced when I was very, very young. I grew up with my mother. My mother was a single mother, worked, she worked. My father paid child support, but it wasn't anything major. Went to public school, played sports, lived with my sister. She got remarried, and she always had an issue with drinking since she was very young, but she got sober for 10 years. At least that's what my aunt told me. I was too young to realize, which was great. Once my sister moved out, she got divorced at the same time, things started to get really bad. It was one of those circumstances where it wasn't just like drinking on a regular basis. I mean, I feel like there's different types of alcoholics and different types of drug users. She was the type of alcoholic that would lock herself in a room for 4 or 5 days at a time and not come out. And you were always worried, is she alive? What's the deal? And this went on my entire high school career. And the time I was in high school, I learned to cope with sports. I played football, did some extracurricular activities. Friends, huge thing. I was able to stay over at my friend's house because their parents knew what was going on. So they were very supportive in terms of just let me get out of the house. But, I got thrown out when I was 19 years old. This kind of started my journey as to where I ended up today. But I learned a lot along the way too. But I never stopped caring about my mother because all I wanted to do was see her get better. But it was frustrating. So it got to the point where she was going to move to Florida because she didn't pay the property taxes on the house, which the state was threatening to take the house. So she sold it in a short sale, and she's like, you know what? I think it's best to go to Florida. My godfather's down there, and he's been sober for 20 years, and she wanted to go down there for help. So she bought herself a condo with that money, and she went to Florida. I mean, I'm like, as much as I hate to see you go, the only thing I want to see is for you to get better, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. So she goes down there, and everything seems to be good until I find out through the grapevine that her and my uncle aren't getting along because she's not staying sober. So he's like, Joe, he's like, you know the rules, whether you know them or not. When someone's doing this, you have to cut them off. That's what they tell you, you have to cut them off. Shit. I'm not really worried because she's down there alone. So somehow, I think my aunt convinced her to move back up here, or maybe she just had enough down there, so she moved up here and got herself an apartment. Still had the condo down there in the meantime while she was deciding if she wanted to sell it or rent it. And then a short period of time later, I got a phone call one day. I remember exactly where I was. I was out working, I was on a sales call, and my aunt's like, your mom's in the ICU. I'm like, oh God, is she okay? She's okay, but you know, they're doing this, they're doing that. So she's in the ICU for a while. They can't disclose any serious details to me because she made my aunt I don't know if they call it the next of kin, whoever is able to be entitled to that information specifically. I thought it was a little strange, like maybe she doesn't want to worry my sister and I, but no big deal. Good thing was she agreed to go to a detox immediately after. She was able to get out of the ICU. And then she spent, let's say like 2 months, you know, I was going there 2-3 times a week, going to meetings. And I remember telling her in a group, because people would argue in those groups, and they're like yelling, they have young kids on drugs. And I turned around to my mom, I said, listen, they asked me, just, you know, everyone's gonna go around the room, see how they feel. And I said, okay, you know, the biggest fear that I have is one day I'm just gonna get a phone call that you're gone. I was like, I don't know if I'm prepared for that. And, you know, we kind of went silent. And I was like, I know, I'm really sorry. She's like, I'm gonna do the right thing. And you know, she did. She, after detox, she went right into an inpatient rehabilitation center that took her insurance. And she was covered for that time Medicaid because she wasn't working. And she wanted to keep leaving. And that's what I noticed the big problem is with the addiction. They go for a short period of time. I know it's probably sucks to be in those places. I'm not these people. These people have problems. I don't have these problems. I'm not crazy. I don't have an addiction. I started to learn that, you know, people that have these addictions just want to be normal. They want to be able to drink like a normal person. They want to be able to, you know, hang out like normal people. But it's impossible. They can't. And sometimes they have a hard time seeing that. So they stay sober for a little while and then they think they're cured. That's it, cured, haven't drank for 2 months, that's it, it's never gonna happen again. That's the biggest issue that I've seen in terms of these trends. It starts and it's right back to where it was slowly. If any of you that have been through it, maybe you're going through it now, maybe you can relate. So she ends up getting an inpatient and then she goes about half an hour out to move into like inpatient, outpatient, where they kind of live in the same house with other people and they have groups, but they're allowed to leave the house, something along that sort. That lasted about 2 weeks. I got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning that she was again in the emergency room somewhere and I'm her emergency contact. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do now because I had to talk to her landlord. Her landlord threw her out because of what happened, because the ambulance had to come for her and whatnot. I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, you know, they threw her out because she was drinking again, bad. And she ended up in this, and then I go to the house and I'm like, no, there's 0 tolerance. We can't take her back. If we take her back, that means everybody else, if they could screw up. I was like, there's gotta be a rule. And I'm like, you guys are kidding me, right? I'm like, what do I do? They're like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, my only options are leave her, which I can't do. Bring her back to my place, which I wasn't sure about because, you know, I have to be stern about it. She's got to get better. Maybe it was just a slip up. So I pick her up and I'm like, we got to get you to detox. And she goes, I'm not going. I want to go to your house. I'm like, that's not an option. You got to go to detox. She's like, no. And I'm like, Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You've got to go. And she said, no, no, no. And then stormed off and said, forget it. She's like, I'll figure it out. She goes, I don't want to go with you. Okay. Well, 3 days later, I get the call that, you know, she was in a hotel and they found her. Heartbreaking as it was still surprising. I just remember the feeling of like my head feeling like a shaken up soda can. And I'm like, it finally happened. My friend was like, no, you're kidding. I'm like, no, I'm being serious, man. I don't know what to do. So I realized a few things from that experience. I look back and I think like maybe I should have taken her to my place. I could have watched her. But someone had told me, you know, it's a blessing that you didn't, because what would have happened was you would have went to work and you would have came home and found her and you would have to deal with it that way. So I got kind of past it in a sense. But at that point in my life, I realized that I could make a decision now. I can make decisions for myself in terms of the work that I need to put in and safeguards that I need to put in to ensure that my children never need to see this and I don't go down that road. So that's when I kind of started my journey. And you know what? I still drink. I drink recreational, but I have to keep it in check because I know it's in my genes. And I do believe it's a genetic thing. I'm not really sure if it is or not. But I always think about it, like, hey, drank a bit over the past, hanging out, and slow it down, taper it off, whatever. I'm sure you guys have been through that too. But there's a lot that happened. My sister deals with major depression and some other psychological issues that's caused her to be constantly on medication, and she deals with some addiction at that point. And then there was my cousin, who was like my brother. I didn't have a brother growing up, so my cousin was the closest thing to me. We were inseparable. We were 18 months apart. We were brothers. We spoke every day on the phone. And he was always a partier, and there was always issues, and never really understood why he had to act out so much. He was one of those that would always act out in school and hang out with the wrong crowd, and I never understood it, but he was all he wanted was admiration from people. He just always wanted to be liked. Didn't matter what it took. But he can go to a bar and if he wanted to, he could pick up any girl there. That's how good he was with talking to people. This kid he was so charismatic. I envied him for it. He was very, very smart too. He was a union electrician. And he was always doing drugs, and he knew I was never okay with it. So he hid it from me. We had times we didn't talk. I knew when he was doing drugs, when he would flake out on me, when we would try to hang out. But I noticed that with him, he was gonna get help. He never actually went to get help, but the cycle always got worse. So when he would get good, he'd be okay for a while, but then when he'd relapse and fall back into it, his behavior and the amount of drug use, maybe the drugs he used, would get worse a little bit each time, and it would just sink lower and lower. So same thing. He just one day, and this was last year, I got a call that he was in hospital and he was in ICU, and it turns out that he got himself a bad batch of something with fentanyl. And it was the same sort of feelings, but looking back at it, it's just you could be supportive, you could try, but you can't force these people as adults to get better. There's only so much you can do, because I noticed, and I don't know if any of you notice this too, the more you push, the more they push you away, because then they just hide it, because they don't want to be judged, they don't want to be told what to do, you get backlash, and you're thinking what's your problem? Someone's trying to help you. Hello, get your shit together, what's wrong with you? But to them, they take it personally because they're self-conscious about it themselves. They don't want to be looked at as that kind of person, they're coping with it, they don't know what they're feeling, they don't know what they're covering up, but all they know is it's a big part of their life, and there's a higher power that's pulling them towards it, and I never understood it. So, to this day, I always worry, and this brings me back to my father and the original story, that I worry I'm going to deal with that same scenario again. The main reason I wanted to share this with you guys is to not only tell you a little bit about myself, but maybe you guys can share some stories too, or give me some insights as to a little more of what you wanted to hear or what I told you. And just know that, it's one of those things that no matter how many books you read, or no matter how much studying you do, or how much you talk, you can never really understand it until you're going through it. And that's one of the biggest things. People are they try to talk to you about it, and you talk to those people who haven't been through it. It's not that you don't judge them for it, but you're you don't know what it feels like. I hear you, and that's great, but you just don't get it. It's different when you're physically going through it, and the stress and the worry is there every day, and you constantly have to worry about people, and then you're at a younger age and you feel like you're taking care of people that are supposed to be taking care of you. But you don't have a choice because they're family. You do have a choice, but the chemistry of being so close with people, you can be mad at them, but you can only be mad at them for so long, right? So I just feel like it's one of those things that you have to understand, and I still don't understand. It's still frustrating. I have sort of a concept, but even now when I talk to people about it and I tell them hey, listen, they don't mean what they're doing, they don't want to be this person, but it's out of their control. What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. I'm telling you, there's an instance, take it from me. I could have stopped talking to my mother, I could have stopped talking to my cousin, I could stop talking to my father. But the one thing I don't regret is that I tried to help and be supportive as much as I could without sacrificing my own well-being. Because a sense of regret, and you can be as mad as you want at these people, I'm sure if they've done things to you that are, you can't forgive, I get it. There's special circumstances, I'm not saying for everyone, but someone in my case, you're just upset with them, you don't speak to them anymore just because they drink. I always worry, and maybe some of you have gone through it, the only thing I worry about is if they passed away and I never got that chance, I could have had the relationship with them and I just didn't. So that's what really I've never experienced, at least, that I can look back and I say, well, at least I don't have that regret. But you know, I don't really know what the what the answer is in terms of dealing with someone that has it. It's almost like you have to stand back and support them and hope that they just come to their senses, because especially with alcohol, you can't force them to do anything because it's legal. And then the more you push, the more they shut you out. So you're at a point where you're like, well, I just don't know how to handle it. So I got to a point where I've talked to people and they've called me and they asked me about alcohol in particular. Drugs is a little different. I haven't had like a mother and father with drug use. I know I've spoken to people where the law has gotten involved and they've gone to jail, and then they've had mandatory things, you know, probation for like 5 years. So they were able to get clean. Same with alcohol when it involved children and they got taken away and then they went to jail, and same thing. But when you get your kids that are old enough to where they're 17 and older and they really start acting up and it's not qualified for foster care, or 18, whatever it is, then, you know, it's free reign. At that point, what do? You know, you could really just hope that they value something more in life than their addiction to get better, and at least be there for the people. And it's, you know, selfish as it's like, get better for me. I mean, you want them to get better for themselves, but I feel like they need a bigger reason to get better, right? So I thought it was important today for those of you that have been watching my videos to get to know a little about me and where I came from. You know, I did grow up with my mother. We were divorced. My parents were divorced at a very young age. I don't remember them being together. I did go to public school, so I had a lot of friends, you know, normal life, walking to school, hanging out, doing the things that teenagers do. I played football to kind of cope with all that, to keep myself busy. But if you guys have any questions or want to know any more, or you have any comments and you want to share your story below, that would be great too. For those of you that, if it's your first time joining me, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it may be a touchy topic for some people, but I just felt like I had to share, especially because I wanted you guys to get a little, you know, knowledge of where I come from and what my background is and what my qualifications are. And hopefully some of my other videos and things that I've learned and I've been through, and majority of things that I've learned have been through, you know, turmoil related things, getting better and really applying it. I think that events in life are the best teachers. You can read a book, but once you've been really through something, you have an emotional attachment to that knowledge. You just don't read something and say, okay, this book says this, so I'm gonna spit that out to these people, right? When you go through something specific and you have an emotional attachment and there's an event that happened, it hits different, right? It feels different. So the knowledge is really understood, and then you can relate to others when you talk about it. It's like talking to somebody about losing a parent, a mother or a father that didn't lose one. I think everyone's been in that position where they're like, you just don't understand now. And they're like, no, I understand. It's like, no, you don't understand because you've never been through it. Kind of the same circumstance, right? But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed already, I hope you do. And I hope I see you for the next video. If not, you guys have a great day. Check you on the next video.